And welcome to CBN NewsWatch for Thursday, October 8th. Coming up, a federal judge blocks the new heartbeat law in Texas and the state's efforts to ban abortion. Plus,
for the feds to basically police parents is getting pushback from more than just parents. And the latest on China's power play in Southeast Asia and why it might be an equal threat to the United States. Plus,
you've got to lead your kids out of darkness, and you have to have the tools to do that.
Facebook, Instagram, and teen suicide. What you can do to help your child. Those stories and more ahead today on NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin this half hour with a federal judge going against the will of many Texans, halting the recently passed Heartbeat Act, which went into effect September 1st. CBN News correspondent Brody Carter joins us now with reaction from the pro-life movement and what's next for this law. Brody.
Well, Heather, one pro-life organization estimates almost 5,000 babies were saved since the Texas Heartbeat Bill became law, which bans abortions after 6 weeks. But last night, U.S. District Judge Robert L. Pittman granted the Biden administration's request to temporarily halt this law. The injunction is the first major setback for the pro-life movement and a 113-page ruling. Judge Pittman sharply criticized the heartbeat bill, known as Senate Bill 8. He's calling it flagrantly unconstitutional on the basis of Roe v. Wade. He also denounced the deputization and incentivization of civilians to file lawsuits against those who abort babies after 6 weeks. The ruling clears the way for women to access abortion once again, but many facilities may not instantly resume abortions, fearful of being retroactively sued if Pittman's ruling is reversed. This is the first legal blow to the Texas law since the Justice Department sued Texas. That was on September 9th. Pro-life support from the Susan B. Anthony list says it's important for the courts to fight back, especially as the Supreme Court gears up to hear Dobbs v. Jackson, which will determine whether all pre-viability prohibitions on abortion are unconstitutional.
This is an activist political judge working with the Biden-Harris administration and, pro-abortion Democrats to silence debate on this highly contentious issue. Very important that pro-life legislators and the people of Texas make their voices heard in this. It's completely unjust. It's an overstep by this federal judge to block this law, and the Supreme Court already allowed for the law to go into effect while litigation continues, so that should be upheld in this instance.
The temporary ban has spurred the state to quickly file a notice of appeal, which could fully reverse Pittman's order. Supreme Court could even be asked to step in on this case. Heather, back to you.
Thanks, Brody. In Washington, a looming financial crisis has been averted for now. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has made a deal with GOP leader Mitch McConnell to extend the debt ceiling until early December. The two sides negotiated all night after McConnell proposed the deal Wednesday evening. Republicans have wanted to make Democrats raise the debt ceiling on their own because they're trying to pass trillions in new spending without Republican input. However, both sides have also realized that without the ability to borrow money, the government will default on its debts, leading to an economic disaster. The solution so far is merely a delay. Congress will face the same dilemma in December. Well, President Joe Biden's approval ratings have dropped again. A Quinnipiac University poll shows just a 38% approval rating for the president, and that's down from 42% just weeks ago. Also down from a high of 50% back in February. Among Democrats, he still has an 80% approval rating. That is compared to 4% from Republicans and 32% from independents. Republicans and independents make up the largest part of the polling sample. Quinnipiac pollster Tim Malloy says Biden has been, quote, battered on trust, doubted on leadership, and challenged on overall competency. Well, does a new Justice Department plan to clamp down on threats against school boards, chill-free speech, and the rights of parents? Some top Republican lawmakers say it does, and they are pushing back against the Biden administration.
You need to be on the front lines every day!
There's seemingly no shortage of upset parents and heated school board meetings these days. Sometimes they're disruptive, like these suburban Atlanta parents who refuse to wear masks.
Please leave the premises or be escorted by security.
The Justice Department says there has been a spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school officials. It has ordered the FBI to work with local law enforcement to identify the threats and prosecute when needed.
If this isn't a deliberate attempt to chill parents from showing up at school board meetings for their elected school boards, I don't know what is.
At a Senate Judiciary hearing Tuesday, Senator Josh Hawley pushed back, grilling Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, who defended the Justice Department's plan, and Attorney General Merrick Garland.
As the Attorney General's memorandum made quite clear, spirited debate is welcome, is a hallmark of this country. It's something we all should engage in.
No, I don't think so, Ms. Monaco. With all due respect, it didn't make it quite clear. It doesn't define those terms, nor does it define harassment or intimidation.
Other top Republicans and conservative activists have been making the point that the Attorney General could end up crushing voices on the right.
This could potentially be the weaponization of government against those of us, men and women of faith, who have conservative values.
Citing threats and intimidation, the National School Board Association pressed the Biden administration to get involved. Its examples, though, mainly found fault with parents opposed to masks in class and critical race theory, setting up what could lead to political targeting. Still, national security officials can't ignore the local conflicts. They've watched a rise in violent extremism and how true domestic terrorists prey on those with legitimate concerns.
So that's the concern I have, is that when you have so many grievances in the country, in this moment, that's what we're spending a lot of time thinking about and feeling, is all of the things that are wrong. It creates vulnerability in people, and it creates opportunities for these darker causes to recruit them into something violent.
For now, both political parties are taking advantage of the moment, with school boards becoming the new political hotspots, resulting in record numbers of recalls and new waves of candidates.
I think school boards are going to probably be the most popular entry level into social discussion.
And in what could be a precursor for 2020, education is energizing Virginia's competitive gubernatorial contest.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Glenn Youngkin is against requiring vaccines for teachers and healthcare workers.
The Attorney General has given the FBI 1 month to create strategies to protect people from intimidation, harassment, and violence. But there's concern that if not everyone feels protected, there could be growing backlash that could drive political unrest. Well, health authorities are cautiously hopeful that the country is coming out of the latest COVID surge. New cases are down 40% over the last 3 weeks, and deaths have declined by 15% since mid-September.
We're finally turning a corner on this specific surge. There's been some peaks and some valleys, and it's hard to tell if this is going to stay low forever, but at least we're in good shape.
Still, some cities are doubling down on mandates. Beginning November 4th, Los Angeles will require proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test to enter restaurants, gyms, shopping malls, and other venues. Pharmacies and grocery stores are exempt. New York City is also considering new mandates on public workers like police and firefighters. And we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Taiwan's defense minister says China could be ready to mount a full-scale invasion of the island by 2025. CNN reported that warning just days after China sent more than 150 warplanes over Taiwanese airspace. On this week's episode of The Global Lane, analyst Gordon Chang says the Chinese Communist Party may be testing America's resolve.
A lot of people say, well, this is just China trying to show off, because this started in an intensified phase on Friday, which was China's National Day, marking the 72nd anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic. What I'm concerned about is that when we don't push back, even though this might be just chest beating, China thinks it can do more. And when it thinks it can do more, it moves much further in a much more provocative way which means that it does then start to really create danger in the region. And that's largely because they're doing things which people have to oppose. So, for instance, we've seen dangerous intercepts of the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force in the global commons. One of those incidents could go wrong. And clearly, one of these incidents directed against Taiwan, that could go wrong as well.
All it takes is one shot, right? One wrong step. So if China's in fact emboldened by the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, what else, Gordon, has given the CCP a little more courage to flex its muscle? Would General Milley's phone call have something to do with this? The one that he made last January, of course, to the Chinese general, informing him that he'd be notified before any U.S. military action against China?
Yeah, I think that General Milley's two phone calls, the one in October and the one in January, also reinforced in the minds of Chinese leaders that the U.S. is in terminal decline and cannot oppose China. So I think that what it did was essentially told the Chinese regime that they can do what they want. And also what has really been of concern, Gary, is that especially after the fall of Kabul, we have seen the Biden administration generally go soft on China, and that could be for a number of reasons. But I think that that also would embolden the Chinese because they, again, believe that we're not standing up to them.
While America sends Taiwan military hardware, I know the United States has no defense treaty with the island. So how likely is it that this administration will defend China if it does defend Taiwan?
That's a great question. And we don't know the answer to that because we don't have an obligation to defend Taiwan. And as you point out, we don't have a mutual defense treaty. And this administration is not inclined to engage in talks leading to one.
I know China President Xi Jinping seems determined to reunify Taiwan with the mainland, either peacefully or by force if necessary. Why is Taiwan so important to him? Why is the CCP determined to, quote, take all necessary measures to resolutely crush all attempts at Taiwanese independence?
I think there are a lot of reasons for it. In general, Xi Jinping believes in what he calls reunification and what Taiwan calls unification, because the People's Republic has never ruled the island. You can look at this in the context of the unresolved Chinese Civil War, but the people in Taiwan now believe that they are not Chinese. So, I think from Xi Jinping's point of view, he wants, he believes that China has a right to control all sorts of territories. He's even propagated the notion that China is the only sovereign state in the world. So you can see that he's the most aggressive leader in history. But there's one other thing. And right now there is political turmoil at the top of the Communist Party. Xi Jinping's policies have not worked, and a number of people are attacking him. And so I think that Xi is sort of lashing out.
And finally, Gordon, no one wants a war with China over Taiwan. So how would military action there affect the United States and the world?
Well, since the middle or end of the 19th century, we Americans have drawn our western defense perimeter off the coast of East Asia. And Taiwan is in the center of that line where the East China Sea and South China Sea meet. And that means it is critical to our defense. But even more important than that, we have Taiwan, a vibrant democracy. China is attacking not only our democracy, but the whole notion of democracy. So we cannot allow China to take over any democracy, especially as one as important as Taiwan. After the fall of Kabul, our allies and friends have been disheartened. If we allow China to take Taiwan, we probably are not going to have any more friends in the world. It's that important to us.
Okay, Gordon Chang, thank you for sharing your time and insights with us today, Gordon. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary.
And you can watch Global Lane on this station or on the CBN News Channel tonight at 8:30 Eastern. Still ahead, social media, teen suicide, and what parents can do to help their kids. Facebook and its affiliated sites like Instagram are under scrutiny, especially when it comes to its influence on adolescents. Our Ephraim Graham talked with media analyst Dr. Ted Baer about the growing concern over social media and suicide among teens.
So first of all, what's happening this week with these social giants? What's happening?
Well, Facebook is such a dominant force. I'm an attorney once upon a time. My son is an attorney with a U.S. attorney in New Orleans. These are serious issues. A lot of the artificial intelligence, the AI, as you can see in the movie Social Dilemma, which was made by some of the people who started and were partners in the origination of these services, it gets people hooked, and it sort of plays into their fears and frustrations. And a lot of it plays into their fears and frustrations, which lead down the road, especially susceptible to teen suicide. I was head of a department at City University, New York, and we brought 62 professors together to determine the first media literacy course. And now there are hundreds of thousands of studies, and kids are extremely vulnerable in the teenage years because that's the self-esteem years. And 66% of the young girls have low self-esteem. So what they do is they play on that, and then they get them to move in a direction where they want to commit suicide. It's just like the program 13 Reasons Why, which was a disgrace because so many kids did end up. In fact, my development officer, his son, did that 5 years ago, and it's a horrible thing. So curbing them in is going to be very difficult. So it's nice to see people coming together and saying this is a gigantic issue, whether they're on the left or the right or whatever, and saying we've got to protect our kids. I've got 15 grandkids, so I'm very much interested in this issue, beside the millions of people who come to movieguide.org every day.
What kind of response is Facebook giving to the criticism?
Well, as I told you, I was an attorney with the U.S. attorneys. They're giving these lukewarm, sort of objectionary, just trying to pass it off. We're doing our best. Well, they're not doing their best because they could have dealt with it. They're doing, well, we're taking care of some of these. They're not taking care of them. They should prevent them. They did do something special with Instagram. They were going to start a new service to reach more and more young people. I look at cognitive development theory and the media literacy. The young ones who are in the concrete stage are even more vulnerable than the ones that are in the self-esteem age. So if they had gone in that direction, the good news is they stopped going in that direction. And the better news would be if they had decided that they're not going to go in any of these directions and they're not going to play on people's fears. Fear attracts people to the news. When I was head of the department at Berkeley, et cetera, I teach people, if it bleeds, it leads. You want to have something that captures. You don't want to have something that's just a normal. This is the biggest fire ever. And people get afraid, and that gets them to watch more and more of Facebook, the news, or whatever else. So you have to say, we're going to fight against this, even though it may mean that we're not going to have as many teenagers going to Facebook.
What do you think is next in all of this?
I think sooner or later, if it goes down this road and you're going to get more and more offensive material and more design by the AI, and I refer to the movie Social Dilemma, which is excellent, you're going to have some government intervention. I'm pretty much against government intervention unless it's absolutely necessary. I think the early Paramount Picture cases actually hurt our country more than they were before that, when the studios were in control, because my father was a star. So I think government intervention is always a two-edged sword. Some of it will be good. Some of it could be limiting our freedoms even more. But it's a very problematic issue. And if they don't take their own it's like de Tocqueville said, we either have self-discipline or the whip of tyranny. And we don't want to have the whip of tyranny. So I hope that Facebook understands the word self-discipline means you don't, just play on the fears of our kids to get them down the path where many of them are extremely vulnerable.
While we wait for that, what would you suggest to parents to do in terms of helping their kids survive on social media?
That's the best question I've heard. And I just did another show about this, and I didn't hear that question. There's a lot of things you can do. There are great courses, great sites. We have a course on the media-wise family and the culture-wise family. We know how to teach kids to be media and culture-wise. In fact, one of my doctor-advised people who meets with me once a month. I called and they said, I can't talk because my teenage daughter is cutting. So I sent them the Media-Wise family book, and they worked through all the exercises with them. You can teach children to be discerning on their own and to make the wise decisions. That's the point of this. And there are a lot of courses out there. Ours is a little bit more in-depth, academic, and more dealing with cognitive development theory and media literacy with a biblical base. So there are tools out there to help you teach your children not to go down that path. And it's one of my sad points that our development officer's son, before we could reach him, didn't do that. But this other person that I talk to once a month got the book, started working with her teenager. She was at the top of her class before the COVID shut down. She was very pretty. She went through all the self-esteem issues. She was cutting herself, and she stopped. And now she's got control of her life. And that's what you want. You want them to develop the plumb line to be able to make the difference. And that involves an educational process. And education comes from the Latin word educo, to lead out of darkness. You've got to lead your kids out of darkness, and you have to have the tools to do that.
Coming up, what NBA superstar Shaquille O'Neal says is most important to him. He may be a superstar athlete, but former NBA player Shaquille O'Neal is rejecting the culture that so often accompanies fame. O'Neal told the New York Post celebrities can be crazy, and he's denouncing his, quote, celebrityness. He says he doesn't believe wealth or success makes him any better than anyone else, describing himself as a regular person. He said he'd rather be known as being kind. Like a few months ago, when he and the General Auto gave $35,000 to his favorite restaurant in Atlanta for an employee relief fund to help those who've struggled during the pandemic. The owner says the gift made a huge difference for the restaurant staff. And that's it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can watch more of our programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, please give us your feedback by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. We hope that you have a great day. Thanks for joining us.